Welcome to TrulyFit.
Beck, thank you so much for joining the TrulyFit Podcast. I don't know what round this is, 3, 4, 5, 6, but we're going to be going through trending topics in the health and fitness and nutrition world and just some interesting things that are newsworthy that we want to talk about today. Let's hop right into it here. We're going to go with magnesium for sleep. A lot of people have been talking about this probably over the past 10 years. I don't really know what's going on mechanistically. I know that I used to use ZMA specifically, which is zinc and magnesium together. Tell me about the types of magnesium that are better for this, or the types of zinc. Does this really work? What are the studies on it? Anything that you have that comes off the top of your head?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. I get asked this all the time. Magnesium is an excellent supplement to take for sleep. What you want to take for sleep is magnesium glycinate specifically. And we can get into the different forms of magnesiate and what they're best for. But yeah, magnesium glycinate for sleep, typically between 200 and 300 milligrams is sufficient. And so this is important because they estimate up to 50% of the population is magnesium deficient. It's just not present in the same way that it used to be in our diets. Most people, aren't taking the supplement, and so they wind up being deficient. And so, insomnia is a huge issue, or I think maybe just restless sleep at night. Right, we're all stressed. We have things going on, and so there are options like Ambien and different sleep aids, but they come with a whole host of issues like sleepwalking and certain things like that. So magnesium glycinate, I personally take every night before bed. I get my husband to take it. I recommend it to almost all of my clients. And to have the optimal effects, you do want to take it with zinc. Zinc is another mineral that works on your neurotransmitters like GABA, and it can help induce sleep. So two very safe, effective options for sleep. I do want to say the trifecta, right? If you're really looking to up your sleep game without having to go to the pharmaceutical approach, you want to do magnesium, zinc, and then melatonin. And I think melatonin has kind of gotten a bad rap recently because people say, well, it's a hormone and you shouldn't be taking that. Melatonin is incredibly safe. I recommend people taking it between 3 and 5 milligrams. And if you find that you're waking up at night, your body's metabolizing it too quickly. So then you want to get the time-release melatonin. So time-release melatonin, along with the zinc and magnesium, will really do wonders. And what I want to specify here is you cannot take the gummies for, this is mainly for melatonin, but also for zinc and magnesium, because the quality control on the gummies versus a pill is ridiculous, So basically, just to give you an idea of how they're made, the gummies are made, they go down the little conveyor belt and they are sprayed with melatonin or whatever the active ingredient is. And so like the accuracy of those sprayers and how much actually gets on the gummies, it's totally variable. And they found this in multiple studies looking at multiple brands. So the gummies just really aren't reliable. So you do want to use an actual pill.
This might be a sort of a secondary offshoot of this topic, but I feel like in vitamins, people don't talk about tapering up, tapering down, or just stopping for a little while. Is there ever a time where people are taking like a vitamin, a multivitamin or something, you're just like, well, why don't you just give your body a break and then go back on it? Because why I say that is the first thing that came to mind is when you're talking about melatonin. My thought process, at least listening to other people, was that if you take melatonin for too long of a time, your body just adapts to it, and then you have to keep upping the dose. And before you know it, that's why it's dangerous, because the dose has to be so high for it to be effective.
No, I know that is a theory that's out there, but I don't agree with it. Magnesium is safe. It is a chemical that your body naturally produces. So if you were taking it exogenously, right, if you were taking a supplement during that time frame, it's normal for your body to produce a little bit less because it says like, hey, we already have the magnesium that we need. But then when you stop taking it, your body creates more of it. We're talking about melatonin. Melatonin has been found to be associated with lower rates of neurodegenerative diseases. It acts as an antioxidant. It also, during COVID in the early months when no one knew what was going on, they were actually using melatonin therapy up to 20 milligrams because they found that it actually helped activate certain inflammasomes in the immune system. So it actually is really safe. And I think, as long as you're taking quality brands and you're talking to your healthcare practitioner about it, you should be fine.
On to the next topic.
Cool. Okay. Next topic. So very recently, gender roles were reversed here, and Patrick Mahomes got shamed for having a dad bod. I think he was out. He took his shirt off during the Super Bowl, and he's for being a world class athlete. He doesn't have abs of steel, which is fine. But he got a lot of pushback for that. So I think his response to it was good. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on just the public's reaction and then his reaction.
Yeah, he obviously laughed it off. Somebody of his caliber, his ilk, considered in the argument for greatest quarterback of all time already. He's got a lot of years left to play. Doesn't care, right? He makes hundreds of millions of dollars. So he laughed it off. Patrick Mahomes does not have insecurities, or at least not to that level. But I could go a lot of different ways with this. I think from a football perspective, what people don't understand is as a quarterback, it's not good to be jacked. We've seen time and time again, if you look at the best quarterbacks, they all look a particular way. They all have a Tom Brady kind of body type, the best quarterbacks. Number one, you need mobility in your arm to be able to reach certain levels. You want to throw far. You need that arm to be mobile. So the more muscle you put on that arm, and the less mobile you potentially are, right? Your muscles are tighter, and then we have to worry about joint and ligament damage that you're doing from whatever you're doing. So that's one thing. Two is in-season working out doesn't happen as much, especially with the quarterback. Think about the NFL schedule. It's like they play basically every 7 days, and their bodies take a beating. It's like getting in a car wreck. Every single week, you're getting hit by 260-pound guys who are the best athletes in the world, driving you into the ground, potentially really trying to hurt you. So you're not really going to the weight room that much. Some of the guys do. It depends on your position and what you do. But quarterbacks are typically not lifting in season because they're in recovery mode. And maybe the third most important point here is we don't live in a vacuum. So if you're spending time doing something, you're not spending time doing the other thing. And this is sort of like one of my life's mottos here. It's like you can't, like, a lot of your goals are contradictory because if you're doing one thing, you're not doing another thing. So you have to really decide what is more important than the next thing. So if you're an NFL quarterback, what's the most important thing? Well, number one is typically, film. You have to watch film. You need to know what's going on in the field.
The other players, like the quarterbacks, watch more.
Literally, some positions don't watch any film, or they fall asleep during film session because it doesn't matter as much. It certainly matters for every position, and it's going to help you. But a quarterback has to know what every single person is doing on the field, right? Because everything's in play, right? If you have 4 wide receivers, you need to know all their patterns. If you have a running back, you need to know, is he blocking to my right or my left? If he's picking up the blitz on the left, that means I might have to roll right. What are my linemen doing? Are they, how are they blocking? You have to adjust. So a lot of other positions don't need to know that. They need to know only what they're doing at any given time. So quarterback has to watch a ton of film. Quarterback has to recover, right? Because he's been getting hit time in and time out, and he's typically not the biggest guy. And there's just only so much time to be spent. So I think that's a bigger deal. But I think going outside of football, just talking about fitness again, and fitness and health, there's so many of these guys in the quarterback position. It's a fight or flight thing where you're trying to keep your eyes downfield, read the defense, and make a throw. If you're really strong...
Well, not trying to get murdered, right?
Why not trying to get murdered? You have these guys like these Tim Tebows, right? Or these Michael Vicks. When you know that your feet can get you out of trouble, your feet get you out of trouble. When your feet get you out of trouble, a lot of times what happens is you take your eyes from downfield away, and you try to scramble, and you get out of the pocket, and you move away, and you look for a running lane. And then that makes you not as good of a quarterback. Right? Now you're a dual threat quarterback, but you're not as good of a passer because you didn't keep your eyes downfield. You're not relying upon your pass. So there's almost an advantage to some quarterbacks, the Tom Brady's, even the Drew Breeses of the world, to not be super mobile because they have to then be so accurate and so quick with their decision making because they can't move. Does that make sense?
Sure. I get that.
But yeah, as far as the dad bod's concerned, you'd be surprised how many quarterbacks, really good quarterbacks in the NFL aren't built like superhumans. And there's even a lot of basketball players. Look at someone like a Kyrie Irving. If you ever watch him, he's not built like some of these other guys. It's because, number one, you're burning a lot of calories, which burns a lot of your muscle.
Sure. Running
up and down the court all day long. And then, some guys are just, they're more touch and feel players and more hand-eye coordination players than they are pure brute strength athletes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it says a lot about, physical appearance. Physical appearance isn't always a direct indication of how fit you are, right? Like no one would argue that Patrick Mahomes is incredibly fit. He's a world-class athlete. So like you don't need washboard abs. And in order to get washboard abs, sometimes you have to go to lengths that aren't healthy, right? Like you're doing crazy dehydration diets, so I think, we're a visual species. We're always looking for that. But I think there's not always like a one-to-one there on physical appearance and your actual physical fitness.
Totally not. You see it all the time in mixed martial arts. You'll see two guys enter the cage and you'll guess which one's going to win because of how he looks. And many of times it's not the case, right? Daniel Cormier was one of the best heavyweight champions of the world in the UFC for years. And I mean, if you saw him, you'd think he was just kind of a short, fat, old guy, right? Like he's not, like he does not have the stature or posture of someone, but he was an Olympic wrestler and he had a skill set. And also there's a cardio portion that people don't talk about, right? Well, some people do in my industry, but not everyone knows. The more muscle you have, the more oxygen you have to get to those muscles, the quicker you tire out. So there's an advantage to having a little bit less muscle at certain sizes if you think you're going to need endurance. There's a reason why endurance runners look a certain way and sprinters look a certain way, because the muscle doesn't work the same way in endurance running. You're going to have to feed on that muscle for energy.
Yeah, that's a great point.
On to the next topic.
Next topic. So I actually saw a podcast about this recently, so I'm excited to hear your feedback. But, we live in this modern world. We're both sitting in chairs right now. We sit in chairs all day or on couches or on benches. We're very, very rarely sitting on the floor, except occasionally when we're playing with our toddlers. How is that impacting us? And do you think it's a problem?
I have not listened to a podcast on this. I have not read any official studies on this. So this is just coming from personal trainer Steve. Personal trainer Steve will say the reason sitting on the floor would be the most beneficial in my mind is because of the fact that actually getting up and down off the floor is difficult. So getting down on the floor is difficult. How do you do it? Well, if you put your hand down, well, then we have to make sure you're locking your arm out, using some of your shoulder strength, using your core to lower down slowly because you don't want to just drop down to your butt and hurt your sits bones, right? So you're getting down comfortably. And then getting up off the floor, you have to do it in a particular way where you're focused on kind of your hip mobility. Maybe one leg is out to the side, like we call it a 90-90 stretch. And then again, you're pushing your arm off the ground in order to stand up and you're swinging your leg up and around. There's a strength and a mobility that you need to get up and down off the floor. And if you continue to do that over and over and over, you won't lose it, right? It's one of those things where if you use it, you don't lose it. So for those people who've only been sitting in a chair, they haven't been using those muscles and then they lose that ability in their 50s and 60s and 70s to do that.
Yeah. And, if you think about it, we've evolved as a species to sit on the ground. Like we didn't have I don't know when chairs were invented, but, they haven't been around all that long. And just thinking about how we grow up, right? I remember all the way through first grade, you're sitting on the ground, it's circle time or it's reading time on the carpet. Like little kids are often sitting and playing on the ground. And of course they're more mobile and flexible. And is it the chicken or the egg there, right? Because grownups don't sit on the ground and we're a lot less flexible and mobile and a lot more prone to injury. So I think we're definitely leaving something on the table by sitting in chairs all day.
Yeah. And there is a portion of people who have come to me, and I've talked about this on the podcast, senior citizens that say, I just want to get down on the ground and play with my grandchildren. That's why I'm coming to you. Right. So we work on those skill sets to get down on the ground and get up off the ground. And you just think about why is the reason they don't have this strength anymore? And some of it is because you don't put your body in those positions. You've been able to just sit in a chair. It's very easy to stand up off of a chair, especially typically whenever your hip is higher than your knee, it's very easy to get up and down if you think about that positioning, right? So if you're sitting down in a very low chair where your knees are higher than your hips, it's actually an exercise I do with my seniors. It starts to build strength because then you have to really activate your glutes. You have to activate your core strength. You have to learn to use momentum and lean forward and get off the low stool, the low chair. So I think it's important if you don't use it, you lose it kind of mentality that it's good to get down on the floor here and there to make sure that you can get down and off the floor.
For sure. Yeah. And I actually have seen a study where they were able to predict your life expectancy
Hmm.
based off of if you could sit down and then get back up off the floor without using your hands. And, I think this, like you said, has a lot to do with your mobility and your flexibility and your muscle strength. Because if you think about like a frail 80-year-old person, it's going to be more difficult for them to do it. And in a lot of cultures, like Eastern cultures, they do sit on the floor, right? It's like it is traditional to sit on the floor and eat, and so we're able to see evidence of this time and time again. So yeah, I think we need to all do that a little bit more. Are
I
you
do want to
able
say,
to? Are you able to do that? Have you seen the video where you like can sit
I've,
down and then get back up?
I've seen the video. I haven't tried it in a while. What I will say is I want to make a comment on that study and similar studies. So that study reminds me a lot of the grip strength study, wherein these are causal mechanisms that they're looking at that don't tell the full tale of the story. So it's not the thing that is able to keep you alive longer. It's
It's
that
an association. Yeah.
it's the association. You have that ability because of all the other things you do. So let me focus on that, and then I'll go to grip strength. So the people who get down and up with the floor like that, who can do that, well, yeah, that means you're more mobile. That means you probably exercise. That means you probably
You
tried that,
stretch. Yeah.
or you do similar exercises. You do
Yeah.
similar kinds of
You're a
activities to
healthy
be able to do
weight,
that.
right? That's obviously a lot harder to do when you're
You're at a
obese.
healthy weight,
Yeah,
so there's more people at 110 pounds that can do that than at 310 pounds for
sure.
sure, right? So I think that just doesn't sometimes track with certain people. So instead of like trying to get healthy, they just try to do that. They're like, oh, I want to live longer. Forget about getting healthy.
Which
I
is
just
like
need to
not the
I
point.
just need to
Yeah.
get up and down off the floor with no hands. Then I can live longer. It's the same thing with grip strength. People really thought that
Yeah.
for a while. People read these grip strength studies and not explaining to the public, no, you can sit at home all day long in a chair eating bonbons with a grip strength
Yeah.
toy mechanism. That doesn't mean you're going to live
Yeah.
longer. The
Yeah.
reason
Yeah.
why people who track with higher grip strength who live longer is because these are people who are like working outdoors all day
Right.
long. They're lifting up
Yeah.
rocks, they're getting sun, they're doing things, or maybe they're just going to the weight room and they're lifting. And if you lift heavy stuff, that means you have better grip strength because you're using your hands and you're using your arms. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to point that out because there is really confusion amongst the general public when they hear these studies. They're like,
For sure.
oh, I'm gonna. They think there's a causal mechanism, not like a correlative like addition.
Yeah. Well, it's always sensationalized in the media too, right? So you just see a headline that says grip strength can, increase your grip strength, live an extra 10 years. And like, well, it's not really that, like
Not
let's
really.
actually talk to someone who understands the science. But I saw that study and I got nervous because I feel like I don't have good grip strength. But I think I'm okay.
I think you're okay, and it's something you can work on. Well, I mean, you don't lift heavy weights.
I
So
don't, I mean, like what's heavy? What would be heavy for me?
it's all proportionality on what it is. I shouldn't say heavy because that really doesn't, like you said, that doesn't describe what needs to be done.
Like 1/10 of my weight?
No, forget about numbers that are specific to weight. It has to be numbers that are challenging for you, meaning like there was a number of weight that you could lift at X time, and then a year later you would then increase that percentage by X amount. Does that make sense? Because
So
now
I
you've
have to always be increasing the amount of weight that I'm lifting.
Yeah, I don't like to use the term always, but if there is never a point, then those muscles are not going to grow. You're not going to challenge those muscles, those grip strength muscles, if that weight isn't going up to a certain degree. And then also just you'll find people with the greatest grip strength. It's not about the weight necessarily. It's really how often they're using their hands. You look at like a plumber or a carpenter who doesn't work out, who's just
It has dexterity, yeah, and can do all sorts of
who
different
just
things.
has to
Yeah.
reach under the weird sinks and turn knobs and use hammers all day long. Their grip strength a lot of times is more than the powerlifting athletes who are lifting 600 pounds. It's because they're only doing it for an hour a day. They're doing it for 8 hours a day. So
And that's a reflection of them moving all day instead of sitting behind a computer for 8 hours. So that's what leads to them being healthier, not necessarily the grip strength. Well, tell me if this is too much of a divergent, but like going back to the lifting heavy weights. So are you telling me that if I get fatigued lifting a 5-pound weight 30 times versus lifting a 10-pound weight 15, like, isn't it the same? Or lifting a 10-pound weight 15 times, my muscle is fatigued. It won't grow. It has to be that heavier weight.
No, No, you could certainly wear that out. Where the problem lies is you're talking about one specific muscle when you have multiple muscles working in conjunction at the same time. So which muscle is getting fatigued and which isn't? So for example, in the demonstration you just showed me, you were doing what looked like a bicep curl. So if I hand you a 10-pound weight and you're doing a bicep curl, well, you have a bunch of muscles going on there. If you're squeezing that weight tight, all those hand muscles are firing, your forearm extensors are firing, then your bicep is firing, right? There's two different parts to your bicep.
Yeah.
So which one tires out first? It's different in different people. Most likely for you, your bicep would tire out first. So that means if you fatigued your bicep before you fatigued your forearm extensors, then the bicep is the muscle that's going to grow most likely, where the forearm extensors haven't been fatigued yet because you weren't isolating them. They were the secondary muscle helping. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you're never just working one muscle unless you are in an exercise, unless you're really trying to isolate. But if you're doing an exercise where you have multiple muscles, which muscle are you focused on? Yes, for the bicep, it would be fine. Whether you're using the 5-pounder for 30 reps or the 10-pounder for 15 reps, if that's your point of exhaustion, fine. But did all of your muscles in your arm exhaust at the same time?
If you use a heavier weight, you're more likely to tire out more than one muscle? Because then those other muscles will kick in when your one muscle gets tired?
No, it's complicated because if you get to the point where, let's say, your extensors can't hold the weight, then you can't do the repetition. You're going to drop it. So it's a problem for a lot of people who do, like, let's say, shrugs. You know what that exercise is?
Yeah.
So let's say, yeah, exactly, right? You try to lift your shoulders up towards your ears. Let's go ahead and say I grab 100-pound weights and I try to do shrugs. I don't have great grip strength either. So I might only get 3 shrugs out before I have to drop those weights because I don't have the forearm extensors and the grip strength and the hand strength to hold on to those 100-pound weights. So my traps didn't get tired out. I didn't fatigue my traps yet because my arms couldn't handle the weight. So I only got 3 reps out and I dropped the weights. So in that sense, yeah, I could help my forearms grow, but I really wouldn't be pushing my traps because they didn't get the full extent of the exercise. So it is a little complicated when you're talking about isolating muscles.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're talking about isolating muscles and focus on certain things. And it's a great question and a great point because a lot of people don't think about that. So that's why I cue my clients in on certain things. Let's go ahead and say they're doing chest presses. See, make sure you're not squeezing the dumbbells. If you don't feel like the dumbbells are going to fall out of your hands, rest them in your hands and cup them so that they're not going to fall out, but don't death grip them. Because if you death grip them, what might happen is your forearms tire out before your chest muscles. Then you drop those weight and you didn't get the chest exercise you wanted to. But if I cup them, I take my forearms out of the exercise.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay, good to
know. Sticking with health here, I came across okra water on TikTok. The bastion of perfect information for all fitness and health tips and trends. Apparently it's a thing. Is it exactly what we just think it is? Or are people just making okra and then the water that comes in the pan afterwards, they're drinking it? Why is this beneficial and why are people doing it?
I love hearing new topics like this. You can't predict like stuff like this. You can't make it up. So, I want to ask you first, because you've been in the South for a long time. You were in Savannah, you were in Oklahoma, now you're in Texas. We didn't grow up with okra. Like that wasn't a vegetable that our mom cooked or I think was even available in our grocery stores, but it's very common down south. But I've come to find that it's a very polarizing vegetable. So I think there's people that either love it or hate it. I went to school in New Orleans. It was very popular. The less healthy version, fried okra. But do you like it?
I don't hate it. I will tell you that I've never eaten what I would consider a healthy version of okra because it just doesn't exist in the South. Because health food in general doesn't. So where I was in Georgia, there's no barbecue type restaurant that doesn't have either okra or fried okra. It's almost like as common as green beans would be, or like beans, just baked beans would be at a northern or eastern barbecue place. But I neither loved it or hated it. If it was the only green on the menu, I would order it sometimes, but I didn't love it.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, I'm not a fan either. But that being said, it is a vegetable. It does have a lot of health benefits. I think generally speaking, I'm going to go into some details, but generally speaking, any way you can incorporate more water and more vegetables into your diet, the better. But okra has been found to be high in antioxidants, right? It's high in the phytonutrient quercetin, which is great and related to like a lot of longevity pathways in your body. They have done studies. I haven't seen human studies, but I've seen some studies in mice where they're given okra extract, and they found that it can reduce insulin resistance, that actually supports weight loss. But those studies aren't perfect. Again, they're done in mice. So what people are doing now, you asked, how are they doing? Are they drinking okra water from the pan? No, they're taking the okra pod, they're dipping it in water, and kind of like cold brew coffee, they're letting it soak overnight or for 24 hours, and then they're drinking it first thing in the morning. So, a lot of people are claiming to have benefits from this. I think the benefits could be from drinking a full glass of water first thing in the morning. A lot of people don't do that, right? They wake up, they immediately go to caffeinate. So I think dehydration is an issue. It's great to do that. It's hard to say how much of this is actually benefiting, but it definitely can't hurt you. Unless you have an okra allergy, I would say go for it.
I haven't heard, sorry to change the topic here, but I haven't heard quercetin in a long time.
Oh, am I pronouncing that wrong? I say quercetin.
I have no idea.
Okay. I'll have to find out. I'll have to, Webster.
I feel like I could spell it right now out loud, but it doesn't mean I can pronounce it. But it was really popular during Lance Armstrong's run.
Yeah, I think he was one of the first ones to start talking about it.
He started talking about it. He sold a drink that had it in it. There was even, which I really like. There was, if you go to like GNC, they always have them up front to take. There was like kind of like these like little chewy things, these like square chewy quercetin like vitamin things mixed with like B6 and B12 or something. And then it just, like, the marketing fad wore off. Nobody talks about it. And all of the supplements that I look at the back of it, it's never in anything anymore. I'm like, did Lance ruin this for everyone? Why? Like, what is it supposed to do?
It's coming back. I think now that there's like a lot more longevity experts out there now, right? There's like a lot of universities have anti-aging institutes, and everyone's really focused on longevity because there have been a lot of, really powerful breakthroughs. So quercetin is one of the phytonutrients that it's called a senolytic. So what it does is it can reduce your senescent cells. So senescent cells are basically zombie cells in the body, right? So they're cells that have died, but instead of your body getting rid of them, they leave them there, right? Your body doesn't recognize that they're dead. So these dead cells, these zombie cells, are sitting there, but they're still giving off inflammatory cytokines or other things like that. So they're wreaking havoc in your body, but they're dead. So senolytics are, all sorts of different compounds. Resveratrol is one of them. Quercetin's another. They go in and they remove these senescent cells, and that is really helpful for reducing inflammation and, supporting anti-aging. So it's coming back. And Lance Armstrong was the first one to start talking about it. That's funny. Like a decade or more ago.
Yeah. I never knew that about the cells. It sounds like a cell purgatory. They didn't quite make it to heaven or hell. They're just kind of hanging out. Maybe they have to do a few extra things before the final decision is made.
They're just hanging out, wreaking havoc. It's like The Walking Dead.
Okay, on to the next.
Okay, what about 30-30-30? Redoing that?
Well, oh yeah, 30-30-30. Yeah, we're gonna do that. Sorry, I'm gonna introduce it, and then you're gonna talk about it. Okay.
Okay.
Because I came upon this recently. Didn't know about it. I'm surprised. I've never heard of it. But basically, the principles, the tenets. There's more than 3, but I'll just stick to the ones that actually have numbers in conjunction with them, because I think it's important that maybe you think that some of them are good and some of them aren't. So let me make sure I read it all so that you're not just taking 30-30-30 as a one whole piece, and you can break it down. Eating 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking up. That's one of their 3 main principles. Avoiding foods such as sugar, grains, legumes, and alcohol, and foods that have additives for 30 days. And then getting 30 minutes of steady state cardio exercise a day. What are your thoughts?
30-30-30. Well, off the bat, I think everyone loves a new diet, right? Everyone loves the next new novel thing, and they like something with numbers in it and something that's easy. So I appreciate that this provides like a gentle framework for people who maybe want to try something new. And it's pretty easy to follow, right? It's not like the keto diet where you have to cut everything out. It just gives people like a loose structure. So I'm going to start with the good. I think 30 grams of protein is good. I think for most meals, for all meals, you should aim between 20 and 30 grams of protein. Now, if you find that you're really hungry between meals, you can up that. If you find that you are overly full, then you can aim between 15 and 20. So 30 gram, generally speaking, is appropriate for a meal. What I don't like is that it says within 30 minutes of waking up. So I would like to officially debunk the myth that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It is not. It can be for some people. So you have to listen to your body, right? If you wake up and you're starving, that's awesome. Eat a meal. If you wake up and you're not hungry, so like for me, I wake up, I'm not hungry for breakfast. So I'll have a glass of water, I will have a coffee, but I usually don't get hungry until the afternoon. And I'm now, which we'll have to do another podcast on, I'm wearing a continuous glucose monitor. So I'm able to see my blood sugar levels in real time. So it is natural and normal for your blood sugar to rise in the morning. This like goes along with your circadian rhythm, right? Your blood sugar rises and you have energy for the day. Your body knows it's morning, like let's get up, let's do things. So my blood sugar rises and it's steady and it's normal. And so I'm not hungry. I don't need to take in more energy. I'm fine. So I think whether or not you eat breakfast has to be a personal decision. You have to listen to your body. And the 30 minutes of cardio, I love. I think that's great. People, need to do more of that. I don't think anyone can knock, 30 minutes of cardio. What was the other one? Is no sugar, alcohol, or legumes.
And then also no dairy, no grains, no additives. So
that to me sounds like the paleo diet, which can be very, very healthy. It's great for people who have an autoimmune condition or maybe a family history of autoimmune conditions. And that's mainly what I use paleo for. But generally speaking, there was a big pushback on legumes recently. A couple of books came out that said like beans aren't good for you. You know how it is with fad diets. Like one book is published that says this food is great for you. One book is published that says it's terrible for you. But again, it has to be personalized, right? Beans are one of the healthiest foods in the world, right? Some of the longest lived populations, the blue zones, beans are a staple of their diet. They're filled with fiber and protein and phytonutrients. They're a very balanced food. Some people don't digest them well. So similar with dairy, right? If you're eating the right type of dairy, if you're eating organic grass-fed dairy, I think it could be very healthy. But if you're someone who has a, intolerance to dairy or an allergy, it's not right for you. So generally speaking, I think, this could be a very healthy diet. I think for the typical person, cutting out sugar, alcohol, and legumes probably isn't going to be sustainable. And, I always caution clients when they come to me asking about different diets that if it's not something you can do forever, don't do it. Because maybe you can stick to something for 2 or 3 weeks, you lose the weight, but as soon as you go back to your normal eating pattern, you're going to gain it all back. So find a diet that works for you that you can maintain for the next 40 years.
Yeah, I would imagine if someone came up to me and asked me, and I think the why is important. Hey, do you think I should do the 30-30-30? I would say, well, why? And I would also say, is this the first time you've ever tried a diet? Because I know their answer. They're going to say no. Say, well, the last one didn't work. Why did the last one didn't work? Because you couldn't adhere to it? Do you think there's a chance you're going to adhere to this one? This seems a little extreme. You're really going to be able to adhere to this? Yeah. If you have some sort of goal to ignite the flame, I always talk about this, to set a spark and say, I'm going to do this for 30 days just because I like the 75 hard, because I feel like I need to get through something difficult to push me to spark that sort of like, I care about myself and I know that I can do this and I have resilience inside of me and I can push forward.
And you have a plan for when it's over for what you'll do, right? If it's over and you go back to eating bonbons and sitting on the couch all day, well, then it was all for nothing.
Yeah. I had a friend every Lent, he would do P90 from start to finish of Lent every day. And then in addition to that, he cut out all carbohydrates and he lost 60 pounds every year. And then that was it. And then he did nothing afterwards. So every year with the 60 pounds.
Wait, and then he gained it all back?
Gained it all back. Sometimes and more. Wow. Right. So it's like these extremes don't work. We have to say the why to people. Like, okay, why are you doing this? What is your ultimate goal here? Like, do you want to just be a healthier person? It's probably not the best diet for you. Do you want to just get through something tough to prove to yourself that you can do this? Yeah. And then maybe find some of these foods that are healthier along the way, that don't have additives, that, that aren't in some of these categories that you find concerning, great. Maybe you'll learn something along the way. But this is, like you said, this is not a long-term fix. If you think this is a long-term fix and that's what you're in it for, don't do it, because it's not.
Don't do it. Yeah, I think people crave rules and guidelines, but it's not intended to be long-term, and they want something easy. This 30 grams of protein, 30 minutes after you wake up, and 30 minutes of cardio, like I can do those things, right? You don't have to think about it. But it's not long-term. That's not life, right? Life is you going to a wedding. Life is you going on vacation with your friends and learning how to eat in the real world, and not just, at home while you're following a fad diet.
Yeah, it's really, I'm glad I'm not in the nutrition world. I don't give nutrition advice. I barely give any sort of examples to my clients. It's not an area I work in. And part of the reason is because this is going to sound super like ostentatious, but like I'm so advanced in my, like, the mental part of the nutrition game that I can't relate to people. Meaning, like, I just have healthy food in my fridge, and I have some unhealthy food in my fridge, and I just eat when I'm hungry. I don't have these like large thoughts of what I'm going to do and when I'm going to eat and how I'm going to eat it. Yeah, I write my dinners out on a board just because I feel like it keeps some structure. But I don't have these, like, to me, like, there's nothing easier than just doing what you want. So I just do what I want.
It's not. So, like, it's not that simple. And I think men in general, it's easier for men to commit to something, adhere to a diet. And I don't know if it's just, your brains and how you're built. You're more simple humans. But you also have less, like, fluctuating hormones, right? You don't have the hormone cycles that we have. But so I would say men in general, it's easy for them to lose weight. All of my male clients are more successful than my female clients. However, you specifically, I've known you for 35 years. You have a knack for just making a decision and doing it, and that's unusual. So I get it that you can't wrap your brain around the fact where it's like, just eat the kale salad, just eat it. Like, what's the problem? It's so simple. But I think sometimes the simple things aren't always the easy things, right? So, like, for instance, I'm a board certified state licensed dietitian. I know I need to drink more water. I've been on this call drinking my matcha, and my water is looking at me in the face, right? So it's like, drinking more water is simple, but it's not always easy. Behavior change is complicated. So, a lot of what I do isn't just, I don't give out meal plans anymore. I work with people to create, something specific for them, but it's medical nutrition therapy. And it's like actually diving into how, food is so interwoven into our culture and our traditions, and it's a reward. And so, there's a lot more to it than just eat it. Just eat what's in your fridge.
I know that. And I don't mean to simplify it. Again, it sounds just very like sort of pedantic and ostentatious of me, but I guess there needs to be a point where somebody says, like, psychologically, hey, it's not a big deal if I decide to eat something bad. Like, I am good enough to get over this thing and just, like, put it behind you. It's sort of like they talk about for, like, NFL cornerbacks. Like, if you get beat on a pass on a touchdown, it's like you need to have amnesia about it, because if you sit there and be like, I cannot believe that I let that touchdown up, you're going to let 6 more touchdowns up. So it's like, I ate pizza, no big deal. Like, it's not like, and just forget about it and move on. And, like, look, I guess maybe it's because I don't have these, like, crazy short-term goals. And I think maybe people just, things like the 30-30 diet, they're just like, okay, I'm going to lose this amount of weight in this amount of time and go it this way. It's like, oh, I don't have any short-term goals. All my goals are long-term. So having that, eating the 6 slices of pizza doesn't affect my long-term goal, because my long-term goal is just to be healthy. And I know I'm going to work out tomorrow, and I'm going to work out next week. And most of the decisions I'm going to make over the next year are going to be healthy. So I can make unhealthy decisions here and there.
For sure. I mean, that's I think that's the goal. That's where you want everyone to be. But most people do have an all or nothing mentality when it comes to that, right? And I would say even with exercise, I have clients that said, I woke up late. I didn't get to exercise for an hour this morning. And I said, well, how late did you wake up? And they said 20 minutes late. So I was like, well, so you still had 40 minutes. Like, you could have fit in some exercise. And they're like, well, couldn't do the whole thing. So they scrap it and they don't do it at all. Same thing. If you said, I'm going to eat salads all week, and then there's a work party and you have a, slice of pizza, then people just want to throw in the towel. So there is a lot of psychology behind it. And, that's why I think it's so important to work with a professional, because, it's not something you can do on your own. You really do need a team there to hold you accountable and help help you get your head out of your butt sometimes when you sort of like can't get over things.
Yeah. Just one last note on that. I right now only work with people who want long-term health and wellness. I don't work with people who have specific goals. And I think when some trainers hear that, they feel like it's an out for me. It would be like the same way, I'm just making this up, but like that a psychiatrist would be like, oh, I don't work with schizophrenics. I only work with people who like are just slightly depressed. It's like, if you're working with an easier group of people, then like your job is going to be easier. But that's not why I do it. I do it because it forces you up front to admit that that's your goal. So if you want to work with me, you have to admit that that's your goal is long-term health and wellness. And once you've admitted that, it's going to be easier for me to then pass on all this information to you. It's not because I'm trying to only have easy clients.
For sure. No, I get that. I mean, and that's the most realistic thing, right? Because if someone comes to you and says, I need to lose 20 pounds of fat and put on 10 pounds of muscle by next month, it's like, well, come on, because your clients' wins are your wins. So it's like, I want you to be successful, but we have to manage our expectations and working towards a goal that's just not realistic and long-term isn't going to help you.
Next topic here.
Next topic. Okay, let's talk about weighted vests and ankle weights and types of equipment like that. You see it a lot in the gym. Is it safe for everyone, or is this something that only experts or professionals should be using?
First, from the studies perspective, most of the weighted vest studies are on like bone density, bone mass. They're focused on older populations.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can talk about them, but that's not really, I think, the major concern with them. Yes, they have shown in some studies that it does help with potentially helping with bone density. But, the people who are like anything else, how you use something is important.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you'll see people do something like the Murph, which I think you're familiar with. I told you that I do it. I'll pick out like 3 months or 2 months of the year where I'll just take like 8 to 10 weeks and I'll do the Murph every Tuesday, which is you run a mile, then you do 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, then you run another mile and it's timed. A lot of people will do this. It's a famous workout for CrossFit. They do it on Memorial Day weekend on behalf of the person who's named Murph, who died in combat. And people will do it with a weighted vest. If you use a weighted vest throughout the year, fine. But if you're just throwing on a weighted vest and doing this sort of level of workout for the first time, your chances of injury are now like tenfold. Forget about the fact
weighted vests standard weight, or are they different?
No, that's a great question. Yeah, so most of them you slip weights inside of them.
Ah, okay.
Right, so you have the actual vest that looks like a bulletproof vest or something that you're putting on, and then they have little slots that you can put the weights in. So you can put as little as 2, as much as like 60 pounds, 80 pounds. Wow. So it just depends on the weighted vest and what you buy. But
so what do you think ultimately that is improving? Your cardiovascular fitness, or is that improving specific muscles?
It hasn't shown to that. So in the studies, again, they were done with an older population. They weren't necessarily doing these very difficult workouts, but it hadn't shown like an increase in fat loss or even like caloric burn as much as it did just at like bone density increases.
Interesting.
But I do think, if you're exerting more energy, if you have 80 more pounds on you or 40 more pounds on you, so of course you're going to burn more calories there and then. It makes sense. Sure. But what people aren't thinking about is the difficulty it's putting on the muscles. So if I'm doing a pull-up and I'm wearing 40 extra pounds, at what point, like we just had the conversation earlier, are my forearms giving out before my lats are giving out? And I just can't get back up on the pull-up bar because my forearms aren't used to holding that extra 40 pounds.
Yeah.
Right. So now I can't do those pull-ups. Now I can't get through that. Or maybe I get an injury. Maybe I start to get tendinitis in that elbow area because I have to squeeze so hard on that bar in order to get up because of the 40 extra pounds. So yeah, like anything else, you have to use it appropriately. What you see a lot of people use it for is like going on walks, like rucking, like people in the Army do. That's fine. Great. Go on walks. It's low intensity. You're adding a little bit of weight. It could help bone density. It could force your body to move in maybe a more efficient pattern. I'm all for that. But what I would say is if you're using it in the weight room, like anything else, taper up, go slow, put the weighted vest on with no weights, then put 10 pounds in, then put 20 pounds in. I wouldn't be jumping with it if you have bad knees. Know your body. Work with a professional to say, what are your injuries? Should you be the type of person using this? And what sort of exercises does this make sense for us to use? While you're walking on the Stairmaster, probably sure. While you're doing plyometrics, probably not. So it's all in how you use it. I would say the same thing for ankle weights. What people don't think about ankle weights is your body, your arms and your legs are like, think of them as levers. And if the weight is at an end of a lever, that means you're putting undue stress towards the middle and the other end of that lever. Does that make sense? So if I put my arms straight out and I put all this weight on my here pushing down, that's going to now put pressure on the other side of that lever. So if you put an ankle weight on, and as you lift your knee into the air and you go into that extension position, now I'm putting a lot of stress on that hip.
So you think an ankle weight is worse than like a band, like a resistance band?
I guess I want to specifically say if you're running in them, because people run in ankle weights. So let me walk this back. If you're going to run in ankle weights, as you bring that knee up, right?
Yeah.
And as you go into hip flexion and you're bringing that knee into the air, those hip flexor muscles are going to be working harder to lift that extra weight up. So if they're already not strong, your goal is to get them stronger. You're probably pushing it too much. You're doing too much.
You're more likely to be injured. Yeah.
Now, if you want to go on the ground and put ankle weights on and do side leg raises to work your medial glutes, or even just sitting on your butt with your legs extended, putting ankle weights on and lifting your leg in the air and dropping it back down, that's going to help your hips. That would be the first step. But like anything else, people go 0 to 60 too fast. Hey, I run 1 mile a day. I want to get my hip flexor stronger. I'm going to put on ankle weights and run 3 miles. Okay, you're probably going to get injured. So let's maybe work with a professional first.
Yeah, everyone's looking for the shortcut. And I can see how, for men, the weighted vest is kind of a flex, right? Like you're at the gym, like, oh, that guy's tough. That guy's cool. There's a big CrossFit place down here in Miami Beach, and it's like very, very intense. And I've walked past it and seen guys with like masks on, like sort of like the Bane mask. Have you seen this? So like, I guess that's to restrict oxygen. But I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah. It's not new. I would say it's probably more of in the last 5 years, it's been a trend, but people, in the UFC started it. I think that's when it got a little bit bigger into mainstream, and some famous athletes in the UFC were doing it during training, and they want to restrict the oxygen because they think they're challenging their body more. The studies don't say that necessarily. Yeah. Because then you're doing less. You're not doing as much because of the fact that you don't get to that point in the workout you would have otherwise. Yeah. So it's to be seen. Who knows? I know that if you look at something that's more natural, like an altitude training, studies show that that does help your sort of cardiovascular ability, but that doesn't help with your strength necessarily. Right. So it just depends on what your goal is.
Do you ever use weighted vests as a professional, like in your own training?
No.
You don't think they're useful?
No, and I have a lot of contrarian thoughts in my industry, which is going to be a question that comes up next for us. But I don't like, when I'm doing explosive exercises, I don't want to be slow in my explosive exercises. So wearing anything additional or using additional weight slows you down. It doesn't train those muscles to be as explosive. So when you strength train, you can strength train and you can do heavier weights because the goal is to make the muscle stronger. But most people wear weighted vests for, again, like running and explosive exercises. And to me, that makes less sense to do that. I want my body to be optimally explosive by not adding weight, because I'm actually slowing that force production down. Yeah. And people think, oh, if I have more weight while I'm jumping, then I'm going to be able to jump higher. But that's just not the case.
It's those exercises are more than just about building muscle, right? It's the whole movement in general. Well, I will say that personally, I wear a 30-pound weighted vest of a needy toddler all day, every day. But it's very similar, right? Because I know when if I have to run up the stairs to grab something, and then when I'm carrying her, I can't run full speed. It's, so I think it's probably pretty similar.
Yeah. And to go back to what I just said before, there are a few studies that promote doing certain weighted jumping exercises and things of that nature. The best people that I trust in the industry disagree with that. They think if their goal is explosiveness, you want to do strength training to get those muscles stronger. But when you're doing explosive exercises, you don't want to add weight necessarily. But there are people who disagree with that. But the problem is that when you're talking about athletes and working out, anything helps. So the only thing that you can compare something to is if you have like two twin athletes, and I were to say, okay, you're both 18 years old. For the next 2 years, you are going to do X and you are going to do Y, and then we compare them. Because if you just look at an athlete and go, oh, look, I did these exercises and he got better. Of course, he's an athlete. He was going to get better no matter what he did. I can take an athlete and just have him do push-ups and squats and jog, and he's going to be a better athlete than he was beforehand. But what are you comparing those to is the important part.
Yeah, it's hard to find a control in those studies. So ultimately, weighted vests, you're not a fan.
Use a weighted vest if you're concerned with bone density, if you're concerned with making your exercises a little bit harder that are not plyometric related, fine, go for it. Otherwise, I would stay away from them.
Okay, good to know.
A recent contrarian thought, speaking of that we have on our industry, I'll let you go first and I go first. And let me be clear on this. It could be that they're like them, they're the contrarians and you want to push back against it. It doesn't have to be like you are the outsider, but something that's going around, floating around in your industry that is somehow now the consensus, which are like, why is this the consensus now?
For sure. Yeah. So I think we've touched on this in other episodes, but there is a big push right now for not for athletes. I'm talking about the general population for optimal health to increase protein. And I disagree with that. So, what they found, there was even a recent study that came out in the journal Nature Metabolism, and they found that the amino acid leucine, which is prevalent in a lot of, animal protein, can trigger inflammation and can actually lead to cardiovascular disease. And so it's also well known that the amino acid methionine can trigger inflammation, so much so that there's actually a methionine restriction diet when you're trying to reverse certain conditions or really lower your inflammation. So a lot of these high protein foods, fish, beef, chicken, turkey, eggs, are higher in leucine and methionine than, say, a plant protein. And so I'm not promoting, a vegan diet, but what I will say is if longevity is your goal, you need to focus on a balanced diet, enough protein where you're not starving in between meals, but you do not need to load up on protein. And so it'll be, I don't even want to really speak in grams, right? Because it'll be different for everyone. Like I said, generally maybe 15 to 20 grams of protein per meal. If you're hungrier, go up to 30, but definitely no more than 30 grams of protein per meal. But I, have clients that come to me and they're eating 120, 150, 200 grams of protein a day. And one, that's harder on your kidneys, but two, more and more studies are coming out to say that from a longevity perspective and an inflammation perspective, it's actually better to do a more balanced, lower protein diet with healthy carbohydrates, right? I'm not saying go eat cheese doodles in place of a steak. I'm saying eat healthy carbohydrates, eat a salad, get more fiber in. So I think, protein is really being pushed now as super important to build muscle. And while that's true, I think it's overemphasized. And I think, the nutrient we're really overlooking is fiber.
Longevity can't sell from someone young. And let me unpack that. If I am 28 years old and I'm talking about longevity, well, I'm only 28 years old. I haven't proven anything. I can't show you longevity. So I think the issue is that people are selling what they have. And if you have a lot of muscle and you're 28 and jacked, they're not lying. You do need to eat a lot of protein, and that's how you have to look. Now, the issue is always the conflation between vanity and health. And like you said, longevity, long-term health and short-term vanity. And that's sort of the conflation and the issue, but it's the longevity push is tough. It's what I also try to talk about with clients, what I always talk about on this podcast. I see into the future. I work with older clients. Everyone who's giving you information now is probably under the age of 40 and doesn't know what it's going to be like to be 60 and 70 and 80, doesn't know what that looks like and feels like. I know what that feels like, not because I am that, because that's the clients that I worked with. So I think it's a hard push, the longevity push, but it's important that we don't let people off the hook when they say they're being healthy when they're building muscle. No, you're not necessarily being healthier than the next guy. You're just building muscle.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's different types of blood markers you could look at for inflammatory proteins to actually see, right? And I think that's very important to do at least annually with your doctor. But yeah, generally speaking, you do need muscle as you get older, right? That's important.
Yeah, but what's the line of diminishing returns? It needs to be admitted to, right? So if somebody goes, my only goal is to build muscle, I'll say, well, how much? Like, what's the percentage you want to be? If you end up being 1% body fat, the how you have to keep that up is so unhealthy, right? Because the amount of protein, the amount of training. So at some point, if you could admit, which you would have to, you being someone I was arguing with who actually disagreed, you agree with me, to say, do you believe there's a point of diminishing returns where you can have too much muscle where it becomes unhealthy? They say yes. I go, okay, well, now we agree. Now it's just deciding on how much muscle is actually healthy.
Right. Yeah. And I think, as you get older, it's naturally you lose muscle mass, right? So that's important to focus on that as you get older. But I think it's this combination of resistance exercises, body weight exercises, and eating protein, but it doesn't need to be 150, 200 grams of protein a day. And it doesn't necessarily need to be animal protein. You can get that in a variety of ways. And I think that's super important for people to know, especially as they get older.
This maybe is a sort of a question off of that question, but there has to be certain populations who actually probably use protein better than others. And maybe they are okay with it, meaning all our bodies are very different. And that has to be based off of, I'm not one of these people that say like, oh, take your blood type and you should eat off that or something. But there has to be some strong correlation between where you grew up. If you're an Alaskan Inuit and all you had to eat was ice fishing, like halibut, you're going to have to probably the ability genetically to take in protein more than somebody who grew up in a greener area.
100%. Yeah. Your genes are going to have adapted in a way that allows you to maybe break down protein more efficiently. So again, nutrition has to be personalized. That's why you should work with a dietitian. You shouldn't just follow any fad diet that's out there, but I think generally speaking, so what I preach is what I follow. So I eat a balanced diet. I don't go overboard on protein. And I notice that when I do have a ton of protein, I don't feel good. I kind of feel sluggish. I feel a little bit bloated. And so I think you have to listen to your body to see what's right for you. There's not one perfect diet. There's not one perfect macronutrient count, right? Everyone's looking for a quick, easy answer, but that's not it. You really have to do some experimenting based on your lifestyle, your preferences, your needs, and work with a professional to see what's right for you. But I do see this push in the industry right now, and there's a couple doctors and scientists out there that are really pushing high protein for everyone. And I don't think that's appropriate. So how about you in the fitness realm? What's a contrarian opinion that you have right now?
How much time do you have? I mean, I probably have a million. The one that comes to mind maybe is a little bit more nuanced, but I'll talk about it anyway. And it's like some of the corrective exercise that's being done. I'm a corrective exercise specialist. Take that for whatever it's worth. It's just a certification that you pass a test online. But things like, maybe you'll take something more specific so I can make it like a concrete explanation, like the perfect squat. So Becca meets with the trainer and they go, I want to work on your squat. It looks like maybe your knees are bowing out and we don't have the right hip hinge angle. We're going to work on your perfect squat. Well, there is no perfect squat because everyone's so different. So, a 5'1" Vietnamese female doesn't have the same like femur length proportionality as a 6'6" Norwegian male, right? There's just like, there's different feet, like in how your femur inserts. It's called like anteroversion or retroversion, could be different so that the angles of your hips, a female has like a larger Q angle. Like there's a lot that goes on anatomically, and people will see like, they'll look at the squat and they'll try to point out one particular thing, which is always funny to me. They're like, oh, it must be the ankles. It's like, well, how do you know that? How is it not the hip causing the ankle? Why do you think it's the ankle causing the hip? You don't really know. It's really hard to tell. Like, yeah, you might have lack of hip mobility, but where's the chicken and egg? And how do you prove to me which one is which? So people think they have this corrective exercise down to a science where they can look at the body and just be like, oh, I can put you into the perfect position. But there is no perfect position. There's going to be a better position for you than someone else. And then also it's one of these time things where it's like, if you want to meet with Rebecca and she wants a personal trainer and her goals are like get in shape, and you want to spend 45 minutes of the session with her, like getting her into a proper squat position.
Oh gosh, that would drive me
just
crazy.
wasted her time. But that's a big thing in the industry now. People want to show you how smart they are and what they can do and all these anatomical things going on. It's like, well, you're not really meeting your client's goals at that point. And then I would even argue from the anatomical perspective.
It feels like it's more about the trainer at that point than about the client. And I've actually worked with a trainer before, and, I have high expectations because you're my brother. And I felt like the session was about him. Like it wasn't about me. It's like what the equipment that he wanted to use and what he wanted and his goals for my body. And I was like, this is crazy. So, anyway, that was the only time I saw him. But it should never be about the trainer. It should always be about the client.
I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. How bad it's a low barrier to entry. So you're going to, if you think you found the right trainer after one trainer, then you're the luckiest person in the world, because it's such a low barrier to entry that most trainers suck, or at least suck right away until they really have enough experience, because it's one of those industries where you're not going to eat if you're bad. So you do get good quick because you have to learn to get good, or else you're not going to eat, because there is no salary. There's very, very few salaried positions. You're just making commission. So it forces you to be good, but in the beginning you're not typically. But I will say the corrective exercise kind of annoys me in the industry when people focus too much on that. Again, if that's your client's goal, if they're coming in with an injury and you believe the injury is because of a movement pattern and you're trying to fix that movement pattern, that's a little bit different than you trying to say, I'm going to get someone into the perfect squat. It's like, well, okay, if their goal is weight loss, what are we doing here? Is this really that important?
Yeah, for sure.
On to the next.
Okay, so there has recently been an OB-GYN shortage. So I know specifically in Florida, they've said that by 2030, we're going to have like 5,000 vacancies for OB-GYNs. Obviously, this is a problem. Is it the same in Texas? Is it nationally? And why do you think it's happening?
It's a national problem. If you're an OB-GYN looking for a job, you got your pick of the litter. You can go anywhere you want and you can negotiate whatever rate you want. There's a bunch of reasons why it's happening. People will use politics to blame certain reasons more than others, but I think like always, it's always a combination of things, right? Or it's usually a combination of things that can be attributed to rises or gains in anything. Number one, probably 65% of that industry is female. And so you're less likely to have people who, let's say, retire as OB-GYNs, like serve 30 years. Because if you're also a female who is very well off, you can go part-time quicker. You can get out of the industry quicker. You most likely married a man of similar financial stature, which means maybe if he's a general surgeon, you just get out of the game altogether. You have a kid, you want to stay at home with your kid, right? So you have less people staying in the job because there's more females who take that job. Now, that hasn't been the case historically, but that's been the case of late. More females.
That's true across the board right now. Like after COVID, and I don't know the certain percentage, but so many women had to leave their job, right? Like there was a time where there wasn't any childcare and things got complicated, right? So like so many women have left the workforce in the last, 3-4 years. And I think we're now seeing the effects, not just in the medical industry, but probably in a slew of other industries.
Yeah, it's happening more upstream and downstream, not really in middle America as much as it is I hesitate to say the lower income, but it's what it is. You have lower income and higher income, because in the lower income, you do the math. And if you have 3 kids and it costs you $15,000 a year to send your kids to daycare, and then you talk about having a car and car insurance and gas and the headache it costs and the taxes, you go, well, it's much cheaper for me to just actually stay home. I only make $65,000 a year. Why don't I just stay home with my kid? And then on the higher end of the spectrum, again, you might have the money to go part-time and just say, well, why do I want to deal with this nonsense? All the, the politics inside of the medical care industry or something. If I'm a physician, I'm going to go part-time, or maybe I married somebody of similar ilk and stature who can pay for both of us. And I don't have to worry about that. So that's part of it. The other part is the laws around abortion have been changing and changed. And whenever there's one that is very restrictive, People are worried about getting sued. OB-GYNs get sued more than anybody else. You could imagine why, right? If somebody messes my finger up, maybe I'm mad, but maybe I get over it in a finger and a hand surgery. If somebody screws my child up, I'm going to liquidate every dollar I have in order to go after them and be angry with them, because that's just human nature, right? We want to protect our children. So the rates of them getting sued are now higher. You have more people who are not going into it because of that. So you already had people leaving it, and now you have less people going into it. So it's hitting you on both ends, if that makes sense.
For sure, yeah.
And then there's just really a shortage of physicians everywhere if you're talking about rural areas specifically. So now you have OB-GYNs. They're few and far between. A lot of them are leaving the profession. A lot of them aren't coming into it. And the ones who are there have their negotiating rate. So I'm going to go to South Beach. I'm not going to Montana. So it hits you on all fronts. And the only good answer is that the medical community has a bit more of a capitalist, in my opinion, like mindset, and just says we have to incentivize people to go into this. So we're going to go into medical schools and things of this nature. And not only are we going to dramatically pay people more who go into this, but we're gonna sort of recruit people more, and we're gonna push people to say, if you really want a job and work anywhere you want and make the amount of money you want, this is actually the best to go into. On top of the legal sanctions need to be taken away from. There can't be as 100%. Many.
No, that's crazy that they should have to worry about that. I wonder what the salary is, for an OB-GYN compared to another doctor, because it's kind of a shit gig, right? In that, one, you are a doctor and you have to see people in the office, right? You're like seeing women in the office who are pregnant and who are not pregnant. But then two, you have to be on call to be able to give birth whenever. So it doesn't matter how much of a seasoned physician you are, you're an attending, right? You're 45, 50 years old. You can still get up in the middle of the night to go deliver Mrs. Smith's baby. So you never technically have that freedom. So, and then I'm assuming that all OB-GYNs are trained to do C-sections. So then there's also that like surgical aspect of it, which like, I think we've all considered like C-section to be this standard surgery. It's no big deal, but it's actually a pretty big deal to slice through your abdomen, and it's possible to like nick your bladder and there to be bleeds and, hemorrhaging. So compared to just a general physician, or even compared to you're not getting the money that a surgeon's getting, but you're not getting the hours that a general physician's getting. So I get it. It's
they are. No, they get paid well. They're towards the higher end of the spectrum. Yeah, it's not the financials as much as it is when you get to that level of money, when you're making the difference between whatever, let's just say $390 and $420. Let's say there's two different positions, right? Yeah. And one of them, at the $391, you're so overwhelmed. Yeah. You're just like, there's not enough people. Like, you're handling so many things. You're waking up at night, and then maybe you can make a little bit less than that doing something else. So maybe now you can make $310 or something. It's like you at that level, you have most of your problems solved financially. So you don't want to deal with the BS. So that's,
the money doesn't make it worth it. Yeah. For
so sure. It's really tough when you talk about the incentives just being financial for people, because at a certain level, especially like we said, because those people are typically going to be married to other people of a similar financial stature, not all the time, but many of times, other physicians, other lawyers, things like that. And they're all making collectively a lot of money. There needs to be other incentives. And part of that incentive would be, if you can get more people doing the job, you have less total work. You're not relied upon as much. But again, it's sort of this sick cycle. If you don't have enough people doing it, you don't have the incentives to give that to them. And then we're in this sick cycle. Right.
Okay. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to do secret questions. So I have a fitness related question that I'm going to ask you that I've not shared with you before this. And then you have a nutrition question for me. Okay, so I want to ask you, this is personal. This is just me being selfish. I want to ask you about spinning versus jogging, and like spinning in general as a cardiovascular exercise. So I have a Peloton bike back here. I like using it. I really enjoy it. I enjoy the classes. When I do the full 30 minutes or 45 minutes, I get off, I'm sweaty. I'm like, I feel like I had a good workout, and I'm sweaty. I'm out of breath. Now, at the same time, if I go for a jog, I really struggle. I really, really struggle. I mean, I can maybe do a mile. I don't know if it's my breathing or whatever, but so I'm interested to hear cardiovascular wise, like is spinning actually a good exercise, and why does it seem easier than jogging or running?
Well, one, you've done it a lot more.
Yeah.
So I would make that the most important part of everything I'm going to say here. I'm going to spend the least amount of time on it, but nevertheless, it's the most important. When you do something a lot more, your body's going to adapt to that thing.
Yeah.
If you started running on a regular basis and then went back to spinning, I bet you that you wouldn't be saying that this was easier.
It's that I haven't done it. Yeah.
So that would be the most important, but there are some subtle differences. Number one, your feet are fixed on the bike. So because of the fact that you don't have that sort of like pounding that you would otherwise have, it's not as much of an explosive exercise. You're using sort of a different energy. So it's not exactly the same. You can't really compare the two. I think also with spinning, there comes a point in jogging where it's like it seems like so easy. You're jogging so slow. It's like a 12-minute pace. Like, why am I doing this? And then you ramp it up a little bit, and you're like, "Oh, this is too hard." It's really tough to find that like perfect zone.
Because jogging outside is way harder than jogging on a treadmill for me. Like jogging outside, I feel like I get cramps and I just am like out of breath before I know it. And probably because I can't control my pace. Whereas like on a treadmill or on a bike, you know how fast you're going.
Yeah, and controlling your pace is a big part of it, because if you get out in front of your skis, as they say, too quickly, it's hard to recover for some people.
Yeah.
To get back in that. Another one is that form with spinning, there really is no form because the bike makes you have a particular form.
Right.
So yes, if your bike is set up improperly, if your seat's too high, too far forward, there could be ways in which it could be more difficult for you. But ultimately, as long as your bike's set properly, the form is there for you. It's a fixed machine that's going around in a circular crank position. Yeah. Whereas in running, if you're not a good runner, if you don't have good efficient form, which sometimes is a combination of you just analyzing your form or having someone do it, and then sometimes for a lot of people it's just natural. Like, what is your natural form? You're exerting a lot of energy trying to get to your best form, if that makes sense, your most efficient form, as far as your stride length and how your arms are moving and all of that, right? And sometimes people are paying too much attention to that. They're hyper focused on it. Am I heel striking? Am I moving my arms in conjunction with everything else? And their shoulders get really tight because they're trying to move their arms a certain way instead of just relaxing and running in a much more natural way. So I think that takes more energy away because you're not efficient in it.
That makes sense. But overall, you would consider spinning a good cardiovascular exercise?
Yeah, it's great. If you have it's like anything else, you have to push yourself accordingly.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference in what somebody who spins every day with really, really strong legs can do and someone who doesn't spin often can do. Yeah. So you have to, just like running, right? There's some people who go out and run 20 miles and that's just a day for them. And some people run 1 mile at a 15-minute pace and they're dying. So I think it's gotta be proportionate to you with the spinning. Why another reason I do think spinning is great is because you can change the tempos. You can change the intensity by using the knob. Whatever, bikes are all a little bit different, right? But I can change both the tension that I'm doing and I can change the positioning. I could stand up where I'm pressing down more, maybe using a little bit more glute pressure or quad pressure. And then when I'm sitting more, maybe I'm getting a little bit more hamstring pull. So the fact that you can change that also challenges your body. But if somebody loved to spin and hated to run, I would never tell them like, no, absolutely don't do that over running. I don't think one is better than the other. If anything, you could argue that because running has so much impact on if you're running outside on concrete, that spinning is actually better for you long-term. Now I would argue that
better for your knees. Yeah.
Posturally, the position you're in for both isn't great, but spinning actually is probably a little bit worse from a posture perspective because of how high your knees are up at all points and you're bent over a lot of the times. You're in that really shortened position. So if you're already sitting all day, and now you're in that position, your hip flexors are really shortening, which could put you into sort of like a bad hip movement. So both are really good though. But I would say the reason why you think one is harder than the other is probably because you just do one so much more. You're more efficient at it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. I cheated here. My question is not nutrition based.
Oh boy. Okay.
So I came amongst the 36 question study. You ever hear of this?
Maybe.
Somebody came up with 36 questions to get people to connect.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's amazing. They, at the end of the study, they looked at it and they saw that people basically, like, I think one couple got married.
It was actually to get people to fall in love.
Yeah.
36 questions. Yeah.
And it could have been love, like care love. It didn't. It didn't specify like love, like like romantic
love versus for sure.
But at the end of the study, like more than 50% of the people. This is pre like internet age, or like in the infancy of the internet age, I believe. More than 50% of the people after the study were trying to find the person that they took the study with. That's how much they connected with the person after answering these 36 questions. And one of the couples actually got married.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just, it's questions that are typically a little bit more, I just did a podcast on this actually, but like that opened up some like vulnerability and let you get to know people more than you otherwise would.
Yeah.
I promise you, I picked out one of the little bit more surfacey questions, but it'll let people know more about you. And you have a few seconds to think about this.
Yeah.
But if you could only invite one person living to a dinner party, who would it be? And it's just you and them. It's not like your significant other or someone else. It's you
just
and
like
the other person
over dinner. Ooh, interesting. I will say first, I want to say that I found this study a couple of years ago. And so I looked up all the questions. And then for my 30th birthday, Nick and I took this like really beautiful train ride. It was called like the Orient Express, right? We took it through from Italy up to Switzerland and into France. But like, you're on a train, you're just sitting in a train car and it's really beautiful, but there's like not a lot to do, It's a really beautiful train car. But so I pulled those up. And so we went back and forth with the questions, and it's really cool because, when you've been with your partner for so long, you think you know everything about them, but you may not. And it really does, foster vulnerability and connection. So I recommend people look these up and do these with your significant other, or it's just like great for parties. Okay, so I'm stuck between two people. My two people are Oprah Winfrey, because I think she's amazing. And I think there's, just generally speaking, I think there's this like level of wisdom that comes when you hit 60, right? That you've lived a lot of life. And I appreciate that she sort of came from nothing and then is now one of the most wealthiest people in the world, but still has remained humble and down to earth. And I think she would be really, really fun to chat with. And she's obviously interviewed and talked to some of the most famous people in the world. So I feel like she's got like the dirt and the tea, and we could gossip about some things. So Oprah Winfrey probably is the first person that comes to mind. So probably her. But then I am also really, really fascinated by Lin-Manuel Miranda. So he was the guy who wrote Hamilton. Prior to Hamilton, I was never a fan of musicals. I saw it right before COVID. So like literally we saw it on a Thursday. This was like March 8th, right? And the world shut down the following day. And so I was so taken in by this production that I went and I got the Alexander Hamilton biography that he read in order to write it. And that's what I read all throughout COVID. It was like something outrageous, like 15,000 pages. But the way that he was able to read that and take it and put it into a production, and now Disney Plus has like a filmed version of it. Every time I watch it, I cry. I'm so moved by all of it. And I've never been in a musical. So I just think as a writer and a visionary, he's just like such an amazing person. I would love to chat with him for a while. So those are mine. How about yours?
Those are good answers. Interesting answers. I wouldn't, maybe the Oprah thing was not that I would suspect that, but that's not that surprising. But obviously, a playwright was a little bit more surprising. I think it needs to be prefaced. It's weird. I always put like caveats on all the. I love hypotheticals. Like I absolutely love hypotheticals, but I don't like hypotheticals without caveats, because I just feel like the first thing I think of is like,
you're a man of many rules. I know. Well, you just answer the question without
I'm going to answer
caveats.
the question, but what I'll say is I have to make the caveat that this person would want to be there, right? Because
of course.
Right?
Yeah.
I think
they're
it's an open caveat.
Be there with you. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not choosing a person who
You're not kidnapping them. No, you're going to hang with them.
I'm not. Yeah, but I'm not choosing a person to sit down at dinner because I think they're going to enjoy me. Like I'm selfishly picking them. Does that make sense? Because I would pick different people if it was about.
That's
Yeah.
given. Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure that was given. You never know what the rules are. It would probably be probably Russ Roberts or Sam Harris, but probably Russ Roberts first. He is an economist. He is the dean of Shalem College, and he is a podcaster. He's interviewed, I don't know, everyone and anyone who is important in economics over the past 20 years.
Interesting.
He has a really wide range of interests, from music to poetry to economics to politics. And I guess I would say it's the first podcast I ever listened to.
Yeah.
So it
cool.
sort of gave me maybe the impetus to start a podcast. In addition to that, I think he was, if I had to point out someone who was like my virtual moral
mentor,
guide as a man over the past 15, 20 years, it would be him. So
that's cool. Okay. I've never heard of him. I'll look him up.
Because I've learned so much from him, because I've listened to him, because of that sort of guidance. I would say he would probably be the first person that I would think of.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, I learned someone new today. I'm gonna look him up.
Well, I think we're done here. We'll do another one, I'm sure, in the next upcoming weeks. As usual, people, you can feel free to write in questions to social@trulyfit.app if you have topics you want Becca and I to discuss, or you can just DM us. I am at Steve Washuta on Instagram. Becca's at Happy Healthy Nutritionist on Instagram. This has been an episode of the TrulyFit Podcast. Thanks for listening, audience, and thanks for joining in, Beck.
Thanks for having me.